Welcome back to Parent Academy, episode number 4. We are talking all about rigid thinking today. And of course, I have Galina Lipkin with me, our child specialist and anxiety specialist here at Simply Be. And this might be my favorite conversation so far because rigid thinking is something that we see in 99% of our clients. When you see someone for rigid thinking, how do you explain that to them or the parent so that they understand what they're experiencing?
Yeah, a lot of the time with rigid thinking, it's just this kind of mental lock into this idea that there's a right way or a wrong way. There's a fair or an unfair or a right or a wrong. There's very little understanding of any sort of in-between. So it's very black and white and very little understanding or acceptance that there's even the possibility of there being a gray zone.
Is that developmentally appropriate at some ages?
At some ages it is. So it takes some time and it takes some certain experiences or learning to kind of be able to think more flexibly and kind of fall somewhere in between those two extremes. So yeah, absolutely.
Can you give me some examples of what rigid thinking is?
Sure. So for some kids, they have a lot of rigid thinking when it comes to their grades. So they might say, you know what, I got a 98%, but it's not 100%, so that means I failed. And the goal of that is to kind of be able to move into this place of, yeah, I got a 98%, it's not 100, and yet it's still a really great grade. Or something like kids who really struggle with limitations on electronics. I didn't get to watch TV all day, so that's completely unfair. Versus I got to watch 3 episodes of my favorite show, and then I had to go do my chores. So, you know, I still got to do what I wanted to do, and I had to do my chores anyway.
So kind of thinking the both ends of things, like I'm disappointed I didn't get more TV time and I had to do my chores. That's flexible thinking.
Yeah.
And how do you move someone from rigid thinking to flexible thinking?
So I think there are a lot of different ways. I think it's just identifying what it is and saying, you know, hey, there's an in-between, coming up with examples, kind of helping them think through different situations of times when they did have black and white thinking and thinking of, you know, what would you tell a friend? I think that's really helpful with kids because a lot of the times they can do it for other people and they really struggle to do it for themselves. I think another big help is when parents do it at home. I think as we grow up, we kind of are more flexible in our thinking in general. And so it's something we do automatically. But at home, for kids to hear those examples when we just think them in our heads is really helpful. So if your kids are around and you're cooking, you can say, oops, you know, I didn't do the chicken recipe the way I wanted to. I'm sure it'll still taste great. Or, you know, I don't want to go do my chores either. So I'm going to give myself 5 more minutes with this game I'm playing on my phone and then I'm going to go.
Oh, I love that. So kind of telling your kids what you're going through and how you're thinking about it flexibly rather than, I don't want to go do that, so I'm not going to go do it. It's, I don't feel like doing my laundry right now, and I'm going to do it in 5 minutes after I finish watching this YouTube video or whatever it is. I really like that because parents can have that in their toolbox automatically.
Right.
I like that a lot. And I'd also imagine that using the growth mindset strategies that they teach in schools, which is what's the next best step, instead of that fixed mindset, which is there's no other options. Mm-hmm. And so using the tools that they teach in the academic world would probably lend itself really well too.
Yeah, and I think just in general being able to kind of have that growth mindset and also just learn the skills of negotiation in general, in terms of I can't always get what I want or I can't always get what I think is fair or right or whatever that may be, and working with parents or teachers or wherever that situation exists to kind of say, you know, here's that in between and I can kind of negotiate and compromise on what I want or what I need.
So we can give kids 3 options that are in the in-between so that they feel like they're negotiating but it's within our parameters as the adults. And then also giving them warnings. Hey, in 5 minutes the TV's going to go off, 3 minutes the TV's going to go off, and even setting like a stove timer and giving them the opportunity to turn it off themselves, which is even more helpful because it helps them feel more responsible and not controlled by a parent.
Right, giving them a reasonable amount of control and kind of autonomy in that situation is going to be so helpful for them, and just feeling like it still doesn't feel fair, and yet I've been a part of this decision. It's not just other people telling me what to do.
I'll have to tell you what parents, including myself, would have to give up would be patient. Well, it would have to be time, because to give kids negotiation and time to kind of be flexible, it's harder for a parent because we know we can control things and make things move faster and get out the door faster, for example, versus that negotiation or that autonomy takes more time, and it's almost like we're going to be late getting out the door, and so we over control them just to get things moving. But that's really not fair to them because they're trying to navigate this world, and so we have to add 10 minutes to the routines so that we can give them more space and not just forcing them along and dragging them along and pushing them out the door. Because morning routine, I think, is where parents tend to let go of skills and just bulldoze through the morning and just get out the door. Maybe that's just me, but
well, I think there's a lot to be said for that too, and it's that additional time may be temporary. It may just be we need to add 10 minutes right now so we can learn some of this flexibility, and at the same time sometimes pushing through that routine may even reinforce that black and white thinking, like it has to be done this way right now.
Right, it's a good point. It's a really good point. Okay, I'm going to be better in the mornings now. So is there anything else that a parent can do to help their kid with more flexible thinking?
You know, they can obviously come and see a therapist or find someone who can help them out with that. They can work with teachers at school, social workers at school. You know, they see this kind of stuff all the time. I think the issue really comes in is some kids with really rigid thinking, when there's a limitation or an expectation that's been set, they really struggle to accept that transition or that limitation. And so they can range anywhere in behavior from just crying to becoming really verbally and physically aggressive. So I think it's just kind of kind of assessing where's the situation at that point, and figuring out what level of assistance do you need. Sometimes you can handle it at home. Sometimes if the verbal or physical aggression is so intense that there's a safety risk, that might require just a higher level of care, just to make sure that everyone's safe.
Yeah, and I've heard parents call and say my child has anger issues, and so it's probably more a root of rigid thinking than anger issues being that they're just a generally aggressive or violent kid. Typically it comes from the thought distortions that they have to be perfect, and I've seen that where if they're not good at math and they can't do the math homework in 15 minutes, then they rip up the piece of paper, throw it, stomp out the room, and slam the door. That can be a root of rigid thinking, and not that you have a violent child.
Right, and I think we also forget a lot that anger is a secondary emotion to so many other emotions. So it could be frustration, it could be sadness, it could be anxiety that underlie all of that anger. And so it's not, like you said, it's not that they're inherently angry, it's that there's some other emotion that they're really struggling with.
Probably fear, fear of not being perfect, or fear of failure, and looking stupid in class when they come with a ton of pencil marks on the math homework that looks messy, for example, and so you want to erase it and want a clean sheet of paper, you want to start over. There's a lot of those routines or rituals that start to kind of wrap around trying to avoid mistakes.
Absolutely.
Well, this was really helpful. I feel like I got my own therapy today. This is just wonderful to be here. Thank you. This is episode number 4, and we will see you back next week for episode number 5. Bye.